has been coaching football, young kids. And let me tell you, if I have to use one of those strategies to get you to do what I want, I will. I hope you're all very well adept at push-ups and laps.
But David, you know what? I met already some people in the room who met other people they didn't know or met people they knew and they wanted to reconnect. And some people shared things they're very proud of. And I'll go with Michael Lewis.
Oh, geez.
Aha! You can introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Michael Lewis, Canadian Centre for Community Renewal. Well, I have to say, one thing I'm proud of is having been involved in the process of formation and conception of the Canadian CD network as far back as 1989. And, networking in a variety of ways in the next 10 years after that with people, many of whom are here, who gave leadership to and brought into being the Canadian CD network, which was officially incorporated in 1999. I'm thankful for that history. We've had a challenge, I think, in a number of ways in different provinces, even in Quebec, which is one of the strongest of all of the provinces in some of the areas of community economic development and the social economy. It's getting hit hard. What I'm proud of is that we're asking a question, is given a changing context, how do we rebuild the strength of not only community economic development and the social economy, but broaden the base and coalitions, both from the point of view of pressing policy, but also advancing our work on the ground in communities. And I think that's possible. I think I can see a new energy emerging given the challenges we face. And I'm very proud of the fact that the team in CCEDNet has persisted and has enabled us to come together here. So that's what I would like to say I'm proud of.
Thank you, Mike. Une autre personne, John. What would you like to celebrate with us tonight? Something you're very proud of.
Thank you for choosing me at that.
And you can introduce yourself.
And thank you for repeating the question, because I missed it originally. Absolutely. I'm John Buck from, and she wasn't here for our last conference, so she doesn't know how risky it is to give me a microphone.
No. I can handle that.
I'm John Buck from CCEDNet. We are obviously very delighted to have all of you here with us, delighted to be part of this wonderful event. We've been supporters and connected to CCEDNet for the longest time, and just in terms of, I think, what we would like to see, what I'd like to see.
And celebrate.
And celebrate, yeah. I mean, I think the wonderful engagement and participation of all of you in community economic development is the dimension, I think, to celebrate. The part that I'm looking forward to a lot is the questions that we're going to really be looking at over the course of the next few days. The question of what is the future of community economic development in Canada, I think, is a fundamental question. And I think, I don't know if we'll answer it by Friday. But I think certainly engaging in the discussion and the things that will emerge from the discussion are things that we're really looking forward to, that I'm really looking forward to.
And I'm very proud CCEDNet and CCEDNet organized this conference. Anybody else? Une autre personne qui aimerait partager ce qui le rend le plus fier ou ce qui la rend le plus fière ou quelque chose à célébrer? Puis je me rends vers toi, Luc, parce que ça serait le fun de savoir quelque chose d'extraordinaire qui se passe dans le mouvement coopératif. Hey.
Bon, moi aussi, je te remercie, Ethel, pour m'avoir choisi.
Oui, ça me fait plaisir.
Bonjour, Luc Morin, directeur général du Conseil de la coopération de l'Ontario. Un moment fier, je dirais, dans la dernière année. Nous avons été un partenaire avec le gouvernement de l'Ontario pour de la finance sociale. Alors, on a créé des partenariats aussi avec Desjardins, l'Alliance des caisses populaires de l'Ontario, pour du microcrédit et des petites subventions. Alors, c'est une formule magique qu'on a mis de l'avant, où ce que 40 000 $ de microcrédit de Desjardins, et nous, on peut accompagner 15 000 $ de petites subventions, et ça donne vraiment un bon coup de pouce pour des entreprises sociales et des coopératives pour aller de l'avant. Et je suis fier de dire, à date, nous avons créé près de 100 emplois, et aussi au-delà de 8 entreprises sociales et coopératives, et ça continue. On a une autre rencontre là, la semaine prochaine pour approuver d'autres projets.
Merci, Luc. Ah, oui, oui. Diane. Haha. Good CD friend. And Kathy, you're next. And after that, I'm giving you back the stage, David.
I'm Diana Jeddig. I'm with Community Futures Ontario. I've been with the program since 1988. But anyway, I'm really proud that Community Futures is still operating in rural communities. I'm proud that this government will continue to support it, yes, and that maybe they'll see the light and start to expand it to other areas because of its success. And I'm also so happy to see all of you again. You guys are like my most favorite people.
Thank you. And we will continue that tomorrow morning. So I'll just grab another person. And that's good. Kathy said, I can do it. I can do it.
I could do it. My name is Kathy Lang, and I'm a consultant now, but worked for many years with the cooperative sector before becoming a consultant. And one thing that I'm really want to celebrate is the collaboration that's happening within the sector. And in the last little while, I've been doing a lot of work with rural social enterprise as a strategy for building resilience in rural communities and with rural nonprofits. And TEL has been working with us, and we've been working with the universities. We've been working with the Ontario Nonprofit Network, with the CFDCs at the regional level, with intermediaries at the rural regional level. It just goes on and on and on, and that is something that just makes me feel so proud. And I really feel like we've developed a way of doing things that we just need to keep on doing that. And as we begin to answer these questions for ourselves in the next few days, I think collaboration will definitely be part of that solution and the ways that we'll be working together into the future. And that will include even more private sector work, but also bringing the nonprofits in their with all of their full potential to the table with the private and the public sector to show what we can do for our communities.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And David, I said it, she was the last one, but with a CED with a gender perspective, I need to have 3 men and 3 women. And I spoke to one woman a bit earlier, and she shared with me so many good stories from further north. And can you introduce yourself?
Okay, my name is Janet Krantz, and I'm with the Women's Economic Council. I'm really a newbie here, and we're working on a project with the Women's Economic Council that sort of is introducing me to a vast array of people that I just wasn't aware of what an exciting environment this is. And so one thing in talking to Atel just now was to realize what she's engaged in and how that connects with many of the people that we've been talking with for the Women's Economic Council. And again, to find another opportunity to network, to connect with all of these ideas that are so vibrant out there and that are going to make our project really hum. So I'm very happy to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I'm going to throw off your equal balance and throw one more male voice into the mix, and I'll make that my own, and just say that I'm happy to celebrate the idea that in the work that we do in our day-to-day lives, the the lives that we affect, the people in the communities, the organizations, the people in those organizations. I mean, that's something to be very proud of, and it makes you sleep easier at night knowing that you've helped somebody progress, or a community progress, or an organization progress. And I think that's really important, and that's what drives what I do every day. Now, we had intended for you to be able to hear from the Honourable Jean-Yves Duclos, Federal Minister of Children, Family and Social Development, in person, but he has unfortunately had a scheduling conflict arise, and so he has prepared a short video message for us.
Ministre de la Famille, des Enfants et du Développement social, je suis heureux de contribuer au dialogue national avec vous tous et toutes. Le travail que nous accomplirons et que nous accomplissons ensemble créera un Canada plus juste et plus prospère. To quote Tonya Sermon and Victoria Lennox, we don't want just any innovation, but innovations that are solving real problems that unlock a higher quality of life for all. That focus is important. It's about people. We want to see Canadians move out of the homeless shelter and step out of the line at the food bank. We want seniors to retire with security and dignity. We want more people with disabilities and Indigenous people to participate in the workforce. C'est justement ce pourquoi nous sommes ici, pour travailler ensemble et favoriser des partenariats à l'échelle communautaire afin de trouver des solutions novatrices et durables à certains des problèmes les plus complexes de notre société. Pour commencer, notre gouvernement se prépare à vous consulter dans 2 activités clés. Premièrement, nous élaborerons ensemble une stratégie pour l'innovation sociale. Pour ce faire, nous avons besoin d'intervenants comme vous pour nous donner votre point de vue pour concevoir cette stratégie importante. Deuxièmement, nous élaborerons ensemble une stratégie de réduction nationale de la pauvreté. Une fois de plus, nous comptons sur vous et nous vous serions reconnaissants à obtenir votre point de vue et votre collaboration en vue de bâtir cette importante stratégie. We've already started to take concrete action to combat poverty. Thanks to the Canada Child Benefit, approximately 300,000 children will be lifted out of poverty starting this year. This will decrease child poverty from approximately 11.2% to 6.7%, which is the lowest child poverty rate in the history of our nation. Developing these strategies and putting good policies into place is an important undertaking, and we can't do this appropriately without solid evidence. That's why our government has also reinstated the long-form census. This will help give us the insight, detail, and numbers we need to make sound policy decisions and help our social and economic development for the future. En conclusion, chers amis, je crois que l'innovation sociale en tant qu'approche présente un énorme potentiel pour notre société. Ensemble, nous pouvons apporter un véritable changement. J'espère que cette conférence connaîtra un franc succès. Merci.
Oui. Et j'ai besoin d'au moins une personne dans la salle. I need at least one person in the room who will tweet, because Mr. Duclos is not with us and we want to thank him. Donc, merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Ministre. But please tweet something about the whole room here. Thank him for his speech. And I think he engaged us on 3 different strategies, and I think we need to be there, involved all over the country. I switched to English. Do I have a good English tonight? I'm okay? I have good days and bad days, by the way. But I really want to thank David because you shared what you're celebrating tonight. I really want to thank everyone who broke the ice, because I went and get you to share your own way of celebrating something tonight and share it with others, and thank you very much. Tomorrow morning, we'll invite people who want to share their stories and what they want to teach others about something they're very proud in their own context. But I'm very proud about what I will do in the next minute. I feel privileged, and I'm very pleased to introduce our keynote speaker for the evening, Rankin MacSween. Rankin has worked, and I see you. You're right there. I didn't say hello yet. Rankin has worked with New Dawn Enterprise in Sydney, Nova Scotia, since 1977. In 1993, became president and CEO of the New Dawn family of companies, and today serve on the New Dawn board as a director and ex officio member of all standing committees. For many of us in the room, Rankin has been inspiring us by his practice, his wisdom, and not a long time ago, because years don't count after 50 years old, I found out. And not a long time ago, you were inspiring a lot of social entrepreneurs at the National Social Enterprise, and I remember many things you told us that night. I won't spend too much time to talk about Rankin's biography, but it's in the conference website, and you will see, with all his practice, all the work he's done in the community, you will hear about his BA, and his MA, and the other MA, and his PhD, and his honorary doctorate, as well as some of his many community leadership roles. But I really want to highlight that Rankin was one of the 16, oops, I count me in for a few seconds, Mike, control me, was one of the 16 founding members of the Canadian Community Economic Development Network, and one of the 3 people to have been named an honorary lifetime member of CCEDNet. Tonight we are thinking about celebration, and as we think about celebration, it couldn't be more fitting that we hear from Rankin. New Dawn Enterprise was Canada's first community development corporation taking a CD approach. They are celebrating their 40th anniversary this year. 40 years. Yes. This is a milestone worth celebrating. From modest beginning in 1976, New Dawn now employs over 175 people from the Cape Breton community, and it serves 600 Cape Bretoners each day through its many companies and projects. Rankin has a book, co-author with another CD luminary and great friend, Stuart Perry, and I'm sure he's thinking, we're thinking about him, that will be published imminently with reflection on those 40 years. And we are very pleased that he has agreed to share some of those reflections with us tonight. Please welcome Rankin. Rankin.
Excuse me just a minute. Are we going to, is there a lapel mic? Okay, that would be great. Thank you. This is a bit of an advertisement, first of all, before I kind of open up. And if I don't do this, I'm going to forget. So back in 2015, there was a book published by Cinevex University entitled Citizen-Led Innovation for a New Economy. And there was a number of organizations in North America that were profiled and described, and New Dawn is included in that. So Cinevex asked that I bring a couple of those with me. So they give me 6. So I've taken them all the way from Sydney, and I'm not taking them back. So they're $20. My wife, Marie, has them there, and I need 6 people to buy one. And if you haven't got the $20, I'll give it to you, because I'm not taking them back to Sydney. Okay? 5 left. No, I have one here. I wanted to show it up there. Please come. Great, thanks. Are we on? Are we on now? Okay. I've decided I'm going to read the book to you. That's what I'm going to do. Look, first of all, I want to tell you I'm quite honored to stand on Mohawk territory here. That is a privilege. And the other thing, I mean, could we close the doors? Thank you very much. I'm quite delighted to be here. Quite delighted. Actually, though, if you've been around as long as I have, you get to the point you're really delighted to be anywhere, right? To be serious for a moment, one of the things, Nudon was given 3 gifts. And those gifts are enabled it to launch and enabled it to survive. And one of the gifts it was given was this movement. Dawn is in Cape Breton. We are on the edge of the earth. We are way down on the East Coast on the edge of the earth. To do this work, and especially to do it in the early years, was to do something quite different, quite radical. And it would have been bordering on the impossible to do that alone. So the hill we've climbed was made easier and probably would have been impossible without the connection with those of you in this country who were doing similar things, maybe in a different context, but the aspiration was the same. So the fact that Where's New Dawn is still standing. And I had a good friend that used to say that survival is not to be, the value of survival is not to be underestimated. The fact that New Dawn is still standing is in part the result of your presence and your work, and that we were able to be witness to that from time to time. So I thank you very, very much for enabling that to happen. I actually feel before you tonight, before this assembly tonight, I actually feel a sense of underlying reverence. And the state of reverence means that there are no words to describe what the sense is. And the best I'm coming up with is thank you. But I say it, inadequate though it may be, from the bottom of my soul to you. So I want to do a couple of things to begin with. I want to tell you a little bit about Cape Breton, and then I'll tell you a little bit about New Dawn very quickly. So Cape Breton is way down on the end of Nova Scotia, as you know. It's gone through, it was an industrial, sort of the east part of the island was industrialized, steel and coal. And that went on for some time, 70, 80 years. The private companies that ran it closed down in the mid-60s. The federal government took over the coal mines. The province took over the steel plant. In addition, the federal government got into the business of economic development. Governments probably do a lot of things well. Running steel plants and coal mines didn't happen to be one of them. And they weren't really, in my humble opinion, they weren't that good at economic development either. So we probably, after that finished up a couple of years ago, and we're probably worse off than when the whole process started. That was nobody's fault. It was a structural problem we had, but the community suffered through it, and the community wears it. One of the interesting things about Cape Breton is the culture. It has a kind of an interesting culture. When I was a kid, when I was like 2 and 3 and 4, I spent my life pretty much with my grandmother. We lived on a farm. It was a poor farm. It was a subsistence farm. And my grandmother had worked that farm. She'd worked so hard that her legs were full of rheumatism and arthritis, and she could barely walk. So she did what she called sit-down jobs. And one of her sit-down jobs was minding me. So I spent those early years, I was blessed to spend those early years in her presence, kind of in a circle around her. And I spent these hour after hour, I spent on her lap. Her face was beautifully wrinkled. She had so many wrinkles because of her hard life, working outside predominantly. And I spent my time on her lap, constantly trying to stretch her skin to see if I could make it smooth again. I failed miserably. But as I stretched her skin, she told me stories. She had a peculiar view of the world, and I do not say, I mean, and I think it was an outcome of the culture. I don't think it was particular to her. Hugh McLennan, the Canadian author who taught here at McGill for many years, spent part of his formative years in the town of Glace Bay in Cape Breton. And one of the things Hugh commented on later in life, I call him Hugh, I didn't know him, I should call him Dr. McLennan, I guess, or something. But one of the things he commented on was he said that the Celtic people, they live with a pending sense of doom. And I remember when I first read that, I was thinking, he must have known my grandmother. When my grandmother, when there'd be children playing, you know when children are playing, young children, there's noise, there's laughter and all that, you know, a lot of noise, keeps getting louder and louder. My grandmother would be listening to that, and she would say, "It won't be long now before there's crying." She was usually right about that. When someone in the community experienced some prosperity, her reflection would be, well, that's not going to last long. So I had left Cape Breton, went to school, worked outside of Cape Breton for a while, then went back, and kind of, you know, when you go back, you begin to see it with fresh eyes, and got hooked up with New Dawn, and then I went off to Toronto to study for a year. And this is after I'd been working in Cape Breton probably about 7-8 years by then. And I remember when I got to Toronto, I'd been in and out of Toronto a lot, but I'd never lived there. And when I got to Toronto, and I was spending most of my days at the University of Toronto, I remember feeling quite alien there. And I couldn't quite put my finger on it. And then, so I got there in September. Then in October, about mid-October, through a fluky combination of circumstances, I ended up going to Indonesia to be part of a conference, to speak at a conference. And we ended up, we were there about 10 days. And I had never been to a developing country before. I'd never been into a tropical climate before. And clearly, I didn't speak the language. But it was the oddest thing. I felt Indonesia seemed familiar, much more so than Toronto. It's not to say, and you got to understand, I mean, Indonesia was under an incredibly oppressive regime at that time, and there was a lot of suffering. This is not to compare Cape Breton and Indonesia in that way at all. But I think some of the themes were the same. And one of the themes that I think Cape Breton overlapped with Indonesia was in respect to a dimension of the culture. Indonesia was a culture of survival. People were trying to survive. And that's what I knew in Cape Breton. That's what I'd come to understand. In Cape Breton, it's all about try to get to Friday. Try to hang on. Try to hold it together. It's a culture of survival. My experience in Toronto, and this would be, I'm sure Toronto is complicated, so I don't mean to diminish that complication of that grand city. But certainly, in terms of my experience within the bubble I was living in within Toronto, the culture was a culture of mastery. People had plans. People had careers. People were talking about the long run. That was new to me as I had rediscovered Cape Breton. Now, in the midst of this, New Dawn emerges. In the midst of that culture of survival. And I'm not going to spend any time kind of telling you, showing you the org chart or going into a lot of detail about the organization. I'm just going to give you a little probe of it here and there, just to give you a sense of it. So what I'm going to do is show you 4 quick videos about these have nothing to do with describing the big picture of the organization. They're just little examples of a couple of the things we do. These are short. I think there's 2 of them 30 seconds long. One might be a minute, and the other one might be a minute and change. So if, with the cooperation of Xavier, we're gonna see those for a minute.
Mercado builds web-based logistics management software for music festivals and large events. New Dawn's investment in Mercado has helped us grow our team and expand outside of Canada with our market share. We talk a lot about people leaving and that's a problem in our economy locally, but also the money that leaves here. When people invest in funds and mutual funds that have no value for the community here, that's investment capital that could be used to build industry and build opportunities in our local region.
I'm Jeremy White, founder and alesmith here at Big Spruce Brewing in the thriving metropolis of Nyanza, Cape Breton. So our history has been one of rapid ascension to the sort of maximum output that this little building could produce. The New Dawn CDIF was there for us as a source of capital. We should not be sending 95% of our beer money out of this province. Investors in this community should not be sending their investment money outside of this province.
The first video was about a welding. We run a school, and it's a welding program. And most of the fellows that attend that, and mostly fellows, we do have some women, but a majority of fellows. I mean, these are not folks who are going to go to Harvard, or we're going to go to the seminary or anything like that. And for many of them, school hasn't been a great success. So the team of instructors there do a marvelous job of bringing them in and setting the stage for them to have an investment in society. It's quite marvelous, the impact of that. For a whole lot of reasons, we're in the process of selling that, but that's a whole other story. The other two in the middle were about the business of raising money in the community. It's interesting, you know, when we were industrialized, that was traditional capitalism in terms of the money came from far away, and there was a big industry. And so then that all kind of came to an end, and then the government moved in, and all of the money, investment money, development money, was public money. In most instances, that's called socialism. And I have nothing against socialism, but that's what it was, although we didn't call it that in Cape Breton, but that's what it was. But at least in the Cape Breton instance, that didn't work. So we're like a bit of like a failed Soviet republic or something now. And what's interesting about the New Dawn's raising the money under something that some of you would be familiar with in terms of the CEDF program, and really that's about, I mean, that's about the community beginning to learn how to take the risk. Nothing happens without risk. Who takes the risk? So we've tried big capitalism, we've tried socialism. For us, it hasn't worked. So for this has got to be about the community learning to step in and get behind the people that want to do something interesting. Last time I spoke to a plenary session of CCEDNet was in 2001. And that was 15 years ago. I know, you know, that we don't meet all every year. So it's 15 years ago. So, I mean, if history is any indication of the future, so the next opportunity I'd have would be in another 15 years. So my concern is that I'll be quite old by then, and enfeebled or incompetent or something, or dead. So in many, I mean, this is it for me, I figure, eh? So there's a hell of a pressure. I mean, this is. So I was thinking, I've really been thinking about, well, what the hell am I going to say? I really need to say something profound, something significant. So I've been thinking I should say something, I should come up with something like the 7 key elements to success or something like that. But anyway, I decided not to do that. But what I want to tell you about, if you'll indulge me here, I want to tell you about something that happens to an organization. It certainly happened to us more than once. And I would describe it as going in to the valley of death. When you go in, sometimes you come out, sometimes you don't, but you certainly can't come out the same way you went in, because it changes you. So let me tell you about one example of that experience, and it's a long, complicated story. It was 7 years, and I've got about 10 minutes here to tell you what happened over 7 years. So hang on, we're going to go through this pretty quick. We'd taken over a military base. Some of you know a little bit about this story. We'd taken over a military base, and we're operating it in a whole variety of ways. We were into it about 10 years. One March in 2004, snow came off the roof of one of the housing units and broke the line extending between the fuel tank and the house. We burn fuel oil. We don't have access to natural gas. We burn fuel oil in a lot of the units. So the tank was full, 200 gallons. I don't know how many liters that is, but 200 gallons spilt. Now we'd run into this before, unfortunately, so we know what to do. You kind of get an engineering firm and a hi-ho, and you contact the Department of the Environment, you start cleaning it up. So we're cleaning it up. And as they're cleaning it, they notice they run into weathered oil, old oil. So they chase it, and they go down a bit further, and they find an abandoned fuel tank, half full of fuel, half full of water. It's been there for a long, long time. They can't find the end of that weathered oil. It goes on and on and on. The engineer decides that this is quite interesting, so they go to the next house, they dig in the same spot, they go down, they find another tank. Lots of weathered oil around it, and another tank. Half full of water, half full of fuel. It's been leaking for decades. He does the third one, same thing. When we took over the property, we had an environmental clause, subclause, as part of the purchase and sale, wherein D&D agreed to save New Dawn harmless if there was any contamination, any legacy of contamination attributable to them. So we notified D&D, and I'm quite confident we're going to work this out. The thing I'm a little worried about early on, D&D is incredibly slow to respond. You know, you send them an email, three weeks later, you might get an email back. So this happens in March of 2003, but I'm not worried about it because we got a great document to cover us. Things start to change a bit. The fact of the contamination gets picked up in the audit the next spring. So the bankers begin to get concerned. Now, over the years, certainly up to that point in time, most of what New Dawn had done, it did on the basis of debt. New Dawn always had a lot of debt. So all the people that are holding our debt begin to become concerned. This is a huge display of contamination. So D&D finally comes in September of 2005, and now a year and a half later, they come and we start talking. So things move incredibly slow. Meanwhile, the bankers keep getting more and more nervous. So let me kind of speed it up. Things are moving slow, things are moving slow, things are moving slow. Finally, we're into this we're heading for the 4th year. And D&D, after all its analysis, decides that a cleanup is unnecessary. What they're going to do is manage the risk. So they're saying that the extent of the contamination on most of the units is such that nothing has to be done. There's 14 units where it's high, and there is a vapor arising. So what they're going to do there is they're going to put some kind of a blower under the units and blow the vapors away. I said, you're kidding. But they were dead serious. Now the problem, there was a whole lot of problems with that. One is we house a number of folks who are burdened with some disability. And so this seems a bit inappropriate. At the same time, in the attic, what D&D had put in for insulation was vermiculite. Now, vermiculite will kill you if you breathe it in. So we had been dealing with the federal government on this for some time. They were denying they had nothing to do with vermiculite. They were going to touch it. It's the way they do. They're doing that all over the country in terms of the issue of vermiculite. But the problem is if you put the blower underneath, it changes the pressure. So there's concern you're going to start having pressure on the vermiculite. You're going to pull it into the unit. Finally, we talked them out of that, and they agree they're not going to touch the rest, but they'll take the 14 units down, they'll knock them down, clean up the whole site. But the first step is there has to be a market appraisal done. And the way they work this is they'll do a market appraisal with a number, and then we'll do a market appraisal. And then we negotiate. Now, a market appraisal is going to cost tens of thousands of dollars. Now, you got to understand, things for us are getting skinnier. The bank's just closing up on us, and we've got a consortium of credit unions that owns the big mortgage that's on that property, and they advise us they're not going to renew the mortgage. They're going to walk away. They're going to call it. They're going to call the mortgage. So that means we're heading for big pain here. We're going to start to unravel. We can't do anything, no new projects. I mean, we're just at a standstill. So D&D says they can't proceed unless we do our market appraisal. We say we got no money. Well, they say, well, that's not our problem. We're stuck then. It's an impossible situation. So we're going bankrupt, and D&D is just sort of like watching it happen, and you could argue enabling it. Let me tell you, clearly you're not going to stand there and just take this. So we're busy trying to make interventions. And I'll give you two examples of interventions we tried. We had a friend who knew the clerk of the Privy Council. Cape Breton has all these interesting networks. So we had this friend who knew a friend who knew the clerk of the Privy Council. So we get to the friend of the friend who knew the clerk of the Privy Council, the most powerful civil servant in Canada, and we say to her, get him, go see him, and tell him, give us a senior civil servant to help us sort this out with D&D. The clerk of the Privy Council agrees to do it. So I get notice, he's put the president of ECOA on it. And I'm to call the president of ECOA and have a conversation. I do that. We have a lovely call. It's 2 hours long. I tell her the whole story. She says, listen, no problem. We can get this sorted out. I happen to have an excellent relationship with the assistant deputy minister in charge of the environment. I'm having lunch with her next week. I'll bring this up. I'll be back to you as soon as I get back from Ottawa. A week goes by, I never hear from her. 2 weeks go by, I don't hear from her. 3 weeks go by, I start to call and email her. Nothing. I get nothing back. I haven't heard from her to this day. I don't know what they did to her. Here's another example. I think we did like 132 of these tries, in terms of trying to find a way in. Here's the memorable one. I'm just telling you a couple of the memorable ones because I thought we had her nailed. We know a fella who knew a fella who went to St. Yves with Brian Mulroney. And they had maintained a close friendship. And this guy now lived in Boston. He was a successful businessman. So through the friend of the friend, we get to Boston. He agrees that he will speak to Mulroney on our behalf. Mulroney is vacationing in Florida. And he does. He comes back, we get word back, he's spoken to Mulroney. Mulroney is quite sympathetic, and he has agreed to make an intervention on our behalf. Hallelujah. This is just before Christmas. Mulroney says, though, he wants a description of the whole thing on one page. This is like writing the meaning of your life on one friggin' page, eh? I spent the whole of that Christmas trying to get this sucker on one page. I got her down to a page and 2 lines. I was to fax it to Mulroney's office here in Montreal. I do that early in the new year. A week goes by, 2 weeks go by, 3 weeks. I call the secretary. I call the office, I get his secretary. She's well trained. There is no way she's telling me much of anything, and she certainly makes it clear I'm not talking to the Honorable Brian Mulroney. All she would tell me is that the fax arrived and that it had been put in front of the former Prime Minister. We never heard a thing after that about that. We hired a lobbyist. We didn't hire him. We didn't have any money. We got a loan of a lobbyist that was working for another company. And now I'm getting desperate. I mean, we're getting ready to go down. It's unraveling. The organization is unraveling. So this lobbyist has a contact inside the office of the Minister of Defense who agrees to accompany us to a meeting, a D&D meeting at headquarters with the civil servants we're working with. So myself, the chairman of the board, and the lobbyist, we fly to Ottawa. We're in the cab. We're driving to the meeting. Phone rings. It's the secretary of the contact who my lobbyist friend has in the minister's office advising that something urgent has come up. And he will not be able to join us at the meeting. Like, we're done. We're done as dinner because that was the only leverage we had. We proceed. We go to the meeting. I was never in that building before. So we're on the floor we're on in the Department of National Defense, there's one office. There's one office dead center in the middle of that room. It's glass. And everywhere else, people are in cubicles. And I can't see the end of the cubicles. Whether I go north, south, east, or west, wherever, you just can't see the end of it. It's overwhelming. This might have been a couple of days after spring, or after spring, I guess. It was March. And we go into the meeting. The lead guy is a lieutenant colonel. We'd met him before. He's the lead guy in the file. And it's like a snowstorm on outside. And he's in summer attire. Short sleeve shirt, summer jacket, hanging up. So I make some joke about he's trying to move spring along. And he says, no, he's dead serious. He says, no, we got the memo 2 weeks ago that this was the day. We changed clothes this day. So yeah, I mean, this is the way this works. Right? There's somebody upstairs making decisions about everything, and I never got to that somebody. Anyway, that was a terrible meeting. They beat us with a stick. Essentially said, you got to come up with the money. You want this thing to move, you got to come up with the money to do the appraisal. We say we got no money. They say that's not our problem. I say we're going bankrupt. Well, they said we don't have anything to do with that. I left the meeting, and the two guys I was with, they flew home. I was going somewhere else. So I'm in Ottawa that night. It was wet and raining. I couldn't eat. I spent that night walking the streets of Ottawa because we were in the valley of death. We were going to die. So as I'm walking around, I'm going by the D&D building. Lights are all on. I'm remembering the people, the number of people that are working there. And we're trying to kind of negotiate with this monster. And they're going to kill us. Through this community organization, and they're going to kill us. Generally, the government of Canada is going to kill us. Incredible irony. Incredible injustice. And as I'm walking around that building, I remember a story. There was a guy, Kenneth Clark. He was a historian. And he did a TV series in Britain called Civilization. He wrote a book with the same name after that. And in that story, in that book, he tells a story about the Celts and the Roman army. So the Roman army was heading north. They were in England and they were marching north. This is 2,000 years ago. They're taking England. And these Celts, there'd be a couple of dozen of them living in this kind of camp, and they hear the soldiers coming long before they see them. So they're kind of like hiding behind rocks and trees and hills, peeking to see what's coming. And they see this Roman legion marching. Now, they had never seen this many people before. They didn't know that there was this many people in the world. And they are so magnificent in their uniforms, and they've got such weaponry. And there's hundreds and hundreds of them. And the Celts conclude they're going to die. Kind of felt a little bit like those Celts that night. Nudon stands on three fundamental principles. And these have come hard in terms of learning. And here's what they are. First of all, Nudon stands on the principle of faith. And what I mean by faith is that Nudon believes that no matter the circumstances, no matter the facts, no matter how brutal they be, Nudon believes to the point of knowing that it can prevail. It can prevail. Secondly, Nudon stands on a principle of hope. And what we mean by the principle of hope, is that when you run into an obstacle, and there are always obstacles, Nudon believes you can find a way under it, you can find a way around it, you can find a way over it. Or if that doesn't work, you put everybody's arms together and you blast right through it. And thirdly, Nudon stands on a principle of freedom. The human heart longs to be self-governing, and it longs to be expressive. Sometimes, unfortunately, whether it's an individual or a community or a society, there's a whole bunch of constraints. And what's interesting over time, what was an external limitation, we take it and we internalize it. Certainly Cape Breton, for 150 years, ever since the Europeans came, there have been constraints. And those constraints have been internalized. So for Nudon, freedom, reacting to those prescriptions has been fundamental. And the history of Nudon is a history of kind of taking on one prescription and objecting to it and confronting it after another, after another, after another. Interestingly, it keeps scaling up in terms of Nudon being positioned to move into ones that are more challenging. When the Celts kind of, after they saw the Romans, they went and they kind of convened, and what they decided to do was they decided to fight them, to fight the Roman army. It was pretty audacious. A couple of dozen Celts, hundreds of Romans. So what the Celts used to do when they get ready to fight, they'd build a fire, and then they would get naked, and they would put paint all over themselves, and they would dance around the fire, and they would chant, and they would work themselves up into this incredible fever. And when that fever would get to a pitch, a certain pitch, they'd attack. So the Romans heard them before they saw them too. And they stopped and they were listening and didn't know where that was coming from. And then suddenly, these Celts are coming down over the hill at them with sticks. And the Romans, kind of at the same moment, come to the similar conclusion that these must be devils. And they turn and retreat. And they never come back again. So for us, the question was at Nudon, how do we replicate that? So we spent some time thinking about that. And I mean, what was the equivalent of that in the 21st century? What do you do? To make a long story short, we kind of came up with a plan, and we needed the community. We go to the community. That took a number of weeks to engage the community in Cape Breton and to ask them to join with us and take on the Department of National Defense, which was a big ask. Department of National Defense, there's more people work for the Department of National Defense than live in Cape Breton. And the Department of National Defense has a lot more money than you're ever going to find at Cape Breton. They agreed. The community agreed. It started, went on for weeks, went on for months. The community prevailed. DND finally came to the table. There was a settlement negotiated that was fair, that was just, and that was appropriate. I think that's the work we do. I think that's the work we do together. In 40 years, New Dawn has been about struggling, has been about developing enabling practices, and it's been discovering the fundamental principles on which it stands. Why does it do this? It does it because Cape Breton is in an incredibly dark place. A place that we're in is really struggling. Cape Breton is living, has been living, and is living inside a narrative. And that narrative is about uncertainty. That narrative is about hopelessness. And that narrative is about dependency. Interestingly, New Dawn was born in that narrative, but it wasn't born off that narrative. New Dawn was born out of the creative imagination of the founders. And New Dawn has continued to develop on the basis of the imaginations of those that followed the founders. And every day, New Dawn does work that is about the symptoms of that depletion. But at the same time, New Dawn keeps discovering the infinite possibilities that lie inside the heart of Cape Breton Island. And inside those possibilities, there is another narrative. There is another story that is emerging. And that new story, that story is being constructed by both women and men. That story is being built by both the young and the old. And that story is being written by both the Aboriginal and the non-Aboriginal people. And that story is a story of hope. And that story is a story of confidence. And that story is a story of self-reliance. And that story will be a story of prosperity for all of our people. And that story, too, will be a story that will beckon new people to come to our shores. It will be a story that will call our children home. And it will be a story that inspires a new dawn. Bless you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rankin. That was incredible. Thank you very much. We have a little something for you. Well, that was inspiring, very much so. We have some time now to continue to think about what Rankin has spoke to us about. If you'd like, find some people you don't know in your preferred language, might be easier, and have a conversation about what you heard in Rankin's stories that rings true with your own experience and what from Rankin's talk gives us reason to celebrate. Then before you leave for the night, please take a few minutes to write down on Post-its. I think there's some on the tables. And on your way out, there is a large board over there, as Michelle's indicating to us, right over there. We'd like to have them posted up on that board. We can share and discuss them. Oh. Yes, and of course, the plug for the citizen-led innovation for a new economy. There are 6 to purchase. 6? No, 5. 5? We've had a sale. There are 5 left. They're going fast. So please come and purchase those. And just a few housekeeping notes before for tomorrow. The morning's plenary with Henry Mitzberg, Nancy Neemton, Jonathan Rosenthal, and Laurie. Veridel, sorry. There you go. We'll start at 8:30 in this room. Light breakfast will be served just outside in the hall starting around 7:45. Remember to return your translation headset. I warned you of consequences. They are great. And you'll pick up a new one in the morning. And tomorrow's thread of conversation is what strategic opportunities are before us now. So both for you and your community and collectively for all of us. Do not forget, before you head out, there is still food around to be eaten. The bar is still open, and please post some of your thoughts on the post-it board. Thank you very much for starting us off this evening, and we will see you in the morning. Thank you.